Welcome back to Daily Bread Personal Finance, helping Christ followers develop biblical foundations and practices for their personal finances in order to build true wealth that lasts. This is part 5, debt management, finding peace and freedom. And so $5,271. That is the average credit card debt in Oklahoma. Of course, you might say, why Oklahoma? When I put this together originally, this is something I share with different churches and stuff. And so I live in Oklahoma, so it's helpful to have a statistic related to that. But it's fairly similar to a lot of other places. Again, cost of living is lower, so you could probably multiply that a bit depending on where you're watching this from. Of course, just to backtrack just a second, of course, we're talking about debt management. This is a series of 7 videos. The first is an introduction, looking at personal finance from the perspective of Scripture. What does the Bible say about it? Where do we fit into that? And where does money fit into our lives? And, of course, debt is something that all of us are probably familiar with, whether you've gone to college or you've bought a car or try to buy a house, anything like that. Most of us are familiar with debt to some extent. If you're not, then certainly skip to the next video. And also, I'd like to be friends with you. But either way, let's continue on. So I want to start this one. I talked about it a little bit in some of my earlier videos about cognitive distortions. And so I want to pair that against something called neutral thinking. And so we talked a little bit in spending about why do we spend? What are the times and situations that cause us to kind of lose sight and spend more maybe than we anticipated doing? And so, of course, Proverbs 14:23 says, work brings profit, talk brings poverty. And that's paraphrased, of course. Proverbs 14:30 says, hearts at peace give life. A heart at peace gives life. Envy rots the bone, and it ruins your credit. And so, of course, one of the big things here when we want to talk about debt is not just, okay, I'm in debt, that sucks, but also what are the actions, behaviors, the aspects in our life that might lead us to be in debt again? Because what would be worse than to wipe out $100,000 worth of debt and then to wake up tomorrow and find yourself right back in the same situation? It would be absolutely defeating. There's nothing worse than getting rid of a small $1,000 debt that you have only to wake up and have 4 $250 debts replacing it. And so, part of it is, debt has seemed unavoidable for the most part. And to some extent, it tends to be in current societal structure, so to speak, but understanding what behaviors and thoughts and aspects of ourselves that lead to that is certainly important. And so something I want to look at here is called neutral thinking. It's something that's used by Navy SEALs, Fortune 500 executives, top athletes, Russell Wilson, former Super Bowl champion. Probably not a great year to be quoting him, not due to anything bad. He just is not playing well. He's an NFL athlete and his team's terrible. But, he had a big interview on neutral thinking at one point, and he was quoted as saying, mindset is a skill. It can be learned and it can be taught. And so the idea behind neutral thinking is that you make decisions unemotionally. You analyze the situation, you step back, you analyze the situation, and then you act on new facts. And it seems very simple, but in reality, it's just the ability to not make judgments about what the situation is. Because if we sit and beat ourselves up about everything that just happened or everything that led up to the situation, we're not focusing on the situation itself. We're not focusing on what needs to actually happen to change anything. Because you can't change mistakes, you can't change the past. You can simply act on what is in front of you. And so this is where I want to kind of jump into talking about cognitive distortions, kind of back on neutral thinking. Michael Jordan in the documentary The Last Dance said, why would I ever worry about missing a shot? I haven't even taken yet. And so it's so easy for us to get caught up and start worrying about missing, worrying about failing before we've ever even started or tried. And so, of course, that brings in the first cognitive distortion. I'm kind of list these out for us. It's called all or nothing thinking. So it's perfection or else. It's failure. And it's very easy for Christians because it's either totally perfect or it's, just totally not perfect. You're either completely out of debt or it's not even worth trying. You're in a bad situation. Jumping to conclusions. This involves two things: mind reading and fortune telling. So mind reading is not doing something because you assume no one cares anyways. You assume you know what other people are thinking about something. And this goes beyond money, right? Like, this is just behavior in general. So why would I try? They don't even care. Like, they wouldn't even notice. It wouldn't even matter to them. Well, you don't know that. Like, you can't read their mind. Fortune telling. I'll never get out of debt. I'm going to be in debt forever. This is just too much. It's not something that I can get over. Emotional reasoning. I feel that I'm bad at money, therefore I am bad at money. We attach emotions to it. Money makes me feel overwhelmed, therefore I cannot handle money. Well, okay, money makes me feel overwhelmed, and sometimes it makes me feel like I can't handle money. But also, why does money make you feel overwhelmed? What is the aspect of that is contributing to it? We make should, shouldn't, must statements. I do this a lot. So this is probably me here, but I should save. I shouldn't spend. I should invest. I should be spending less on eating out. I shouldn't, go to the movies. We make these absolute statements, and they tend to result in the opposite behavior. Personalization or blaming others. This is a typical one. We put it on our significant other. We make it about ourselves. Of course, the fallacy of change. If my husband would keep me accountable to my spending, then I'd be more successful at not spending so much. Or if my wife, if she kept me accountable to my spending, then I wouldn't have to buy new golf clubs. You make it the other person's fault that you're making certain decisions. Well, that's obviously problematic. So $58,000 and $27,000. These are the average American student loan and auto loan balances. Minimizing and labeling. Magnification or minimization. These are positive changes that hold less weight than negative catastrophizing. And so we take the good things we've done and we make them really, really small. And we make the bad things that we do really, really big. And we basically tip the balances out of our favor. Labeling or mislabeling. I overspend because it's who I am. I'm a shopaholic. I just can't help it. We turn the negative behaviors into part of one's inherent traits. So if I identify myself as a shopaholic, I'm probably going to want to enforce that label. Assuming the worst. Overgeneralizing. Well, I've tried. It didn't work. It's impossible for my situation. We disqualify the positive. I paid off one debt, but it doesn't matter. Barely moved the needle. Look, I still got $17,000. Mental filtering. Focusing solely on a single late charge or a setback instead of any forward progress. So we filter out any major good progress and we just focus on the one small things that we want to filter in. And so before I dig into this, so with the neutral thinking and the cognitive distortions, again, I'm not going to fix that for you. That's part of something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's something that I've come across in my own sessions when I've gone to see therapists and stuff. And it's just a way, again, recognizing our own filtering, so to speak. How do I view things? What are maybe some of the ways that I tend to act as my own worst enemy? to make the situation look worse to myself than it is, or to justify some of the things that I'm doing, and kind of just trying to get down to the root of it, which is typically emotions, tend to be the most destructive things to us. And again, you might be saying, well, like, tell me how to get out of debt, man. Like, stop talking about psychology. But I think it's just important, again, to recognize ahead of time maybe some of the aspects that put us in that situation, as well as how to get out of the situation. And so something I want to talk about, maybe I should have put this into like spending and the budgeting section and stuff, but an apple a day keeps the debt collectors away. And this is just kind of a simple acronym for the system that I think works the best in terms of beginning to move the needle towards healthier financial habits. So first is automate, then pay bills, debts, tithes first, pay yourself second, live off the rest, expand and diversify your income, investing, and savings. So when I say automate, I mean, set up your bills, your debts, these things, set up automatic payments. In your direct deposit from your work, make sure that some of it's going into savings, make sure some of it's going into investing, but also set up those auto pays on your credit card to pay off the entire balance every month. If you automate it, you don't have to sit there and think about it and make the decision, because you've already made the decision once, and so you just don't have to argue with yourself. So again, eliminating that behavior. Paying bills, debts, tithes first. You make sure your money's going to the important things first, and then you can pay yourself second. Live off the rest, enjoy the rest, but then also in the back of your mind, be expanding and diversifying income. Again, listing out your skills that maybe you have that others don't have, or that others aren't using around you, and then also focusing on investing and saving. Again, an apple a day keeps the debt collector away as well as the doctor. 37%. This is the number of Oklahomans with debt in collection. So a third of people in Oklahoma have at least one bill that is in collections. So the Ramsey method, if you're watching this, almost every Christian I've ever met that looks at finance, and a lot of the ones who aren't Christians too, they've all talked about Dave Ramsey. The Total Money Makeover is where he lays out his main process. And really is simple. You make sure you save up $1,000 in cash first. It's the first thing you do. Once you do that, you've really shown yourself, okay, I can do this. I've got $1,000 in cash, one that gives you a small emergency fund. You can handle that $400 emergency expense. But it also proves to yourself that you're capable of setting things aside or prioritizing even a small decision. And then he prioritizes what's called the debt snowball next. This is probably the longest part of this, but you list out every debt regardless of interest rate from smallest amount to largest amount. And you throw all of your money at your debt, right? And so you pay off the smallest amounts, and then once you get to a bigger amount, you're throwing everything that you would have been throwing at the small amounts to that until it's paid off. And then everything that you would have been paying to that one, you then add to the next one, right? And you keep doing that, and it increases the amount of money that's going to everything. Well, of course, you're making the minimum payments on the other stuff, but it's not really paying it off. Either way, it psychologically is beneficial because you make those small wins up front, and it helps you to kind of keep pushing to tackle the big stuff. And then, of course, you then work on your 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And so 3 to 6 times your monthly expenses, you have that saved up. And then number 4, he focuses on eliminating mortgage. And so there's some pros and cons to Dave Ramsey's method. I think it's great for those who are buried in debt, but it rejects a lot of the importance of having good credit. I absolutely believe in getting out of debt, but also I have to recognize, again, as I've mentioned, debt it's a typical structure. Having a vehicle often involves having some kind of debt, especially with you can't get a standard vehicle now for less than $45,000. But and he's got arguments to all of that, but also, I mean, having good credit's important. If you want to buy a house, most of us are not going to be able to drop $600,000 in cash, or $300,000, even $100,000. It's typically not going to happen, and so having good credit's important. Even if you just needed to get an apartment tomorrow, they're going to run your credit, and so that or everything just tends to cost a lot more. It lacks a solid investment strategy. If you ever look into any of his mutual funds or any of his investment arguments, they're very poor. Very heavily focused on money market funds, which are not the best because they're not always FDIC insured. So some things like that, just very bad interest rates on those. Paying everything with cash isn't feasible for everyone. Also, a lot of places have moved away from, gone to cash-free payment options, so they don't really want to handle cash anymore. And again, some people, they just, it's not possible. Some people have to pay everything in cash. The debt avalanche is more effective than the debt snowball. We'll talk about that. And, personal finance is personal, right? It's different for everybody. And so kind of his total money makeover, it's very effective, but it does try to fit everything into a one-size-fits-all framework. And then back on the Bible theology, he has a very flawed end-game theology. Basically, his philosophy is if all of the good people will get all of the money, then none of the bad people will have none of the money, and all of the good people can do all of the good things with the money. I don't know. Again, we looked at Ecclesiastes, and bad people are going to have money. It's just the nature of things in the world that we live in. So just kind of a flawed underlying philosophy, so to speak, for his framework, I guess. But either way, definitely a good way to get moving in the right direction. And so, like I said, Dave Ramsey's method is really good in terms of giving you kind of baby steps to work through, to get out of debt, to be in a much healthier financial situation and have a better relationship to money. One of the things that I would do differently personally is instead of the debt snowball, I would do the debt avalanche. And there's a couple reasons for this. So one, it prioritizes it by interest rate. It's actually quicker to complete. There's less total interest cost, and it decreases one's risk of unpredictable adverse situations by eliminating the most dangerous debt first. So the difference, of course, instead of listing it by smallest amount of debt, it's by highest interest rate. And so, of course, the difficulty with it is it can be potentially discouraging on a psychological level because your highest interest debt sometimes are the largest. Of course, if you're in the situation where you've got payday loans or even some of your credit card debt, those may not be super high balance, but they're going to have the highest interest rate. So they may automatically already be at the top of the snowball or at the top of the avalanche regardless. But to me, it's important to think about, okay, over the life of these loans, how much total am I going to have to pay to get them paid off? And so if I'm prioritizing amount and not interest rate, the snowball may stay a snowball for longer instead of really getting things rolling. And so really it's a matter of preference. It's just if you do the math, you sit down and really look at it, the debt avalanche will go quicker and it will cost less over time. But again, it just depends, if you really need that psychological boost, we've talked about some of those cognitive distortions. If it helps you to get past those, the debt snowball may actually be better. And so lastly here, give what is owed taxes. So, it's important that we give what's owed. Romans 13, 1 through 10 talks about submission to governing authorities. And it says this is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. And I don't bring this up just because Just a reminder that, you have to pay your taxes. But, Scripture does tell us to, one, do the right thing in all contexts, right? And so, you're getting out of debt. You don't sacrifice, doing your due diligence and paying your taxes. Something Scripture points out is taxes inherently are flawed. They're almost designed as a system to encourage you to try to pay as little as you can because of the way the tax code's written. But, Scripture points out to pay it. I mean, if you owe it and pay it and not owe it anymore. But most importantly, the reason I bring this up, because again, we're talking about what does Scripture say about money and where it fits into our lives and where we fit in that paradigm in our relationship with it. And, the author of Romans doesn't sit too long on talking about money. The second half of that passage, 8 through 10, highlights that the only debt we should leave outstanding is the debt of love. So again, we're talking about debt management, and there may be debts that we have that we owe other people in our relationships. And so, when we're thinking about debt and being in debt and the stress from that, it's not just about money. It's easy to see that because that's a physical, tangible thing. But we also have to consider getting out of debts in terms of ensuring that we are caring for the people around us and displaying Christ's love to them. And of course, talking about forgiving others' debts, there's Matthew 18:21 through 35. It's the parable of the unforgiving servant. And this is one of my favorite parables in all of the Gospels. It basically talks about this man owes the king this insane amount of money, millions and millions of dollars, and he comes before him, and he's going to have to go to prison for the rest of his life. And, he begs forgiveness, and the king wipes away this immeasurable debt. And he goes out, and that night he finds this guy that owes him $20, and he basically strangles him and tells him to give him the money. And, it's just this parable to highlight, we've been forgiven of more than we could, comprehend. But we tend to live in a very unforgiving way. And so, in terms of debts, while we seek to get out of debt, it is also put upon Christians to be in the act of releasing others from their debts to us. And so, just something extra to consider there. Of course, pay to Caesar what's Caesar's. The underlying context, subtext, I guess, there in that passage, of course, the Pharisees are trying to trip him up. And he's saying, pay to Caesar what's Caesar's, pay to God what's God's. Well, of course, everything is God's. And so he's kind of putting it back on them to try to challenge them. And, they can't say, well, it's not Caesar's because it's Caesar's face on it. But they can't say it's not God's because they know it's God's. And so there's more going on in that little passage than we often pick up on, but just important when we consider that. So the final part of this video, of course, list out your debts. Actually go and look at the interest rates on those and try to figure out a strategy that you're going to use to attack that, to get out of that and to put yourself in a better financial situation. I know a lot of us would prefer to be out in, a month or 3 months or 6 months, but all in all, it takes time to get out of debt. It takes time to get to a better financial situation. It's something that my wife and I are working on as well. It's, that's life. That's something we all deal with. And so just take some time here and try to get kind of a plan in place. There's lots of worksheets out there. There's a link on my profile to a site that has some stuff as well. So check that out. And when you're done with that, I will see you in the next video.